1991, the year still crawls through my mind like a shadow that refuses to die. I was 16, maybe 17, staying at an old boarding hostel outside a small town. The building had been a colonial-era residence, cracked walls, wooden floors that moaned with every step, and long hallways that swallowed sound. We used to joke that the hostel itself breathed. Sometimes, in the dead of night, you could almost hear the faint sound of sighing behind the doors, even when no one was awake. My roommate was Daniel. He wasn't like the rest of us, quiet, often lost in thought, and his eyes were the kind that could make your stomach twist. There were days when they looked normal, deep hazel, warm, human. But then, out of nowhere, they would shift, sometimes burning red as if lit from inside, sometimes completely white, like milk glass or fog. We used to tease him at first, "Hey, Demon Dan," but that stopped when we realized it wasn't funny anymore. There were nights he'd vanish from the room. His bed would be cold and untouched, and even if we searched the corridors, bathrooms, or the rooftop, he'd be gone like he had dissolved into the darkness. Then, at dawn, we'd find him sitting cross-legged on his bed, eyes shut, murmuring something in a language none of us knew. Once, I woke up to see him standing by the window at a.m. His face was pale under the moonlight, his mouth moving slowly. When I whispered his name, he turned to look at me, and I swear to God, there was no color in his eyes. They were completely white. He smiled faintly and said in a voice that didn't sound like his, "She's here again." I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. No one in the hostel dared talk about it during the day, but the rumors spread like mold in the dark corners of the building. Some said Daniel had been cursed. Others believed he was followed by a spirit, a woman who loved him too much to let go. The janitor, an old man named Harish, claimed he'd seen Daniel standing in the courtyard at night, barefoot, his arms raised to the trees, whispering to the wind. But Daniel was never violent, never cruel. Whatever haunted him, it never turned him against us. That made it even more terrifying, to know that something could possess a person without wanting to harm, just be inside them, like a parasite that only needed to exist through another's skin. One evening, as we were getting ready for dinner, I noticed Daniel staring at his reflection in the small cracked mirror above the sink. The flickering light bulb made the room pulse between light and shadow. I asked, "You okay, man?" He didn't reply. His eyes were wide again, and a tear rolled down his cheek only. It wasn't clear water, it was faintly gray, like ash mixed with blood. He whispered, "She says the trees are calling tonight." I didn't understand what he meant, but that sentence never left my head. That night, when we stepped out for a walk under the moonlit courtyard, I kept watching the trees, tall, silent, and still. The air felt thicker than usual, heavy with the kind of anticipation. I didn't know then that this was the night everything would change, that it would be the last night I'd ever think of Daniel as just my friend. Because something else was waiting for us in the dark. Something that had been watching him, and now, it was watching me. The night Daniel vanished began like any other Friday evening at Ravenwood Hostel. Dinner had been dull, the air stale with the smell of overcooked rice and damp walls. By 9:30 p.m., the electricity flickered twice the way it always did before a storm, and the corridors turned eerily quiet. No laughter, no footsteps, just that deep, humming silence that seeps into old buildings when everyone pretends not to be afraid. We were six that night, me, Daniel, Marcus, Leo, Landre, and Sam. Daniel was quieter than usual, pale as candle wax. He hadn't eaten. His hands trembled slightly, and every few minutes, he'd glance toward the window, as though someone was standing outside watching him. "Let's go out for a walk," Leo said, trying to lighten the mood. "Maybe some fresh air will fix your ghost problem, Dan." Daniel didn't smile, he just nodded once. So we grabbed our flashlights and headed toward the old path behind the hostel, a dirt trail that wound its way through the backwoods and into the open field. It was the kind of place that felt wrong even in daylight. But under the moon, it was something else entirely, hollow, silent, alive. The air smelled of wet leaves and something sour, almost metallic. Every step made the earth groan beneath our boots. The trees around us seemed to lean closer as we walked, their branches tangling above like twisted fingers. Marcus laughed nervously. Feels like the trees are listening. Daniel stopped. Slowly, he turned his head toward him, those white eyes gleaming faintly in the flashlight beam. They are, he said softly. No one laughed after that. We walked deeper into the woods until we reached the clearing and open space surrounded by towering trees, their trunks thick and blackened by moss. The wind had died completely. Even the crickets had gone silent. The world felt frozen, suspended in breathless stillness. Then it started. A faint creak echoed above us, like wood being twisted, strained. Another followed, then another. The branches of the trees began to move, swaying violently, though there was no wind. It wasn't random. They were shaking, as if something invisible was crawling through them. What the hell? Sam began, but Daniel suddenly gasped and dropped to his knees. His hands clutched at his head, his nails digging into his scalp. Make it stop, he groaned. Please. She's calling me. We rushed toward him, but before we could reach, he looked up. His eyes were pure white, glowing faintly in the darkness. And then he screamed a sound so raw, so inhuman, that my blood turned to ice. The trees around us started thrashing wildly, their branches slapping against each other like bones clattering. Leaves rained down in a furious storm, and through it all, Daniel stood slowly, unnaturally, his body jerking like a puppet on invisible strings. He looked at us, head tilted at an impossible angle, and whispered, "She's here." Then, without warning, he bolted, not running, leaping. One jump took him to the nearest tree. He grabbed a low branch and climbed, bounded upward, faster than humanly possible. We shouted his name, our voices breaking in panic. The flashlight beams darted upward, catching flashes of his face as he swung from one branch to another, higher, faster, until he was just a blur between the shadows. What the fuck is happening? Leo screamed. The branches shook violently. We saw him again, crouched high above, staring down at us. His body trembled, chest heaving. Then he laughed, a low, broken laugh that didn't sound like Daniel. It sounded female. We tried to reach him. Marcus climbed halfway up the trunk before a branch cracked beside his head, nearly impaling him. The air felt electric, humming with unseen energy. My flashlight flickered, then died. "Daniel, calm down," I yelled, voice trembling. For a moment, the woods fell silent again. And then, slowly, he began to descend, not climbing, dropping from branch to branch like a wild animal, landing in front of us with a soft, sickening thud. His shirt was torn, his face streaked with dirt and blood. His eyes were still white, and when he spoke, his voice was layered. Two voices speaking at once. "She says she missed you," he murmured. "Who?" I whispered. He smiled. "You'll see her soon." Before any of us could react, the trees behind him moved again, all at once bending toward us as though drawn by some unseen magnet. The branches clawed at our clothes, our hair, our faces. We screamed and stumbled back, dragging Daniel with us. It took all 6 of us to pull him away from the trees, his body fighting like an animal possessed. When we finally broke free of the woods and stumbled back into the clearing light of the hostel's courtyard, it was nearly PM. Daniel had gone limp in our arms, unconscious but breathing. His pulse was fast, too fast. We laid him on his bed, covered him with a blanket, and sat in silence for a long time. The power went out minutes later, plunging the hostel into complete darkness. That's when I realized something that made my heart freeze. In the silence, I could still hear the branches faintly creaking, brushing against each other. But the window was closed, and the sound was coming from inside the room. The power went out with a dull snap, and the hostel fell into absolute blackness. No moonlight filtered through the windows now, only the deep, suffocating dark that feels almost alive, like it's breathing beside you. For a long moment, no one moved. No one even dared to whisper. The only sound was the faint, uneven rhythm of Daniel's breathing, sharp, wet gasps that echoed in the stillness. "Marcus," I whispered, "find a candle." But before he could stand, something shifted in the room. A soft creak, then another. The wooden floor beneath Daniel's bed seemed to groan, as though something heavy had just stepped onto it. Leo clicked his lighter, the tiny flame trembling in his hand. The orange glow cut through the dark, and for a moment, I wished it hadn't. Daniel was gone. His blanket was crumpled, his pillow stained with a dark, wet patch. Blood or sweat? I couldn't tell. The space where his body had been just seconds ago was empty. Where the fuck did he go? Sam whispered. No one answered. The air had changed. Colder, denser. The shadows seemed to crawl, bending slightly toward us. And then, from somewhere near the far corner of the ceiling, came a sound faint, rhythmic. Tap, tap, tap. We turned the lighter toward it. And there he was. Daniel was hanging upside down from the ceiling, pressed against it like an insect. His limbs were twisted at unnatural angles, knees bent the wrong way, fingers gripping the plaster so hard they left dents. His head hung low, hair dangling toward the floor, and his mouth was open in a wide, silent grin. The lighter flickered once and went out. Marcus screamed. Someone stumbled and crashed into a chair. I reached for the switch, but there was nothing to turn on. The power was dead. Then, from the darkness above, came the sound of movement. A fast, jerking scramble, like something crawling across the ceiling. Daniel, I shouted. Stop this. A hiss answered me. Not a human hiss. It was sharp and layered, like the whisper of steam escaping through a throat. Then the weight of something dropped hard onto the floor. The wood cracked. I didn't see him at first, but I felt him. The sudden shift in air, the scent of earth, and something burnt. And then he was in front of me. The lightning flashed through the window just then. For a split second, I saw his face. His eyes were not white anymore, they were black, deep and glossy, swallowing the light. His skin looked stretched, his veins pulsing dark under it. He smiled, lips trembling. You shouldn't have brought me back, he whispered. But it wasn't Daniel's voice. It was a woman's cold, echoing, broken, like it had traveled 1,000 miles just to reach me. Before I could move, he lunged. His hands wrapped around my throat, squeezing. His strength was monstrous. His fingers pressed so deep, I could feel the blood stop in my veins. Marcus and Leo jumped in, dragging him off me, but it was like wrestling with a corpse possessed by fire. He threw Leo across the room like he was made of paper. I heard the sickening crack of bone as he hit the wall. Marcus grabbed a metal rod and swung, hitting Daniel's shoulder. Daniel didn't flinch. He turned his head slowly, and with a grin that split his lips, he whispered something that made the air vibrate. The rod flew out of Marcus's hands, as though snatched by an invisible force. The windows began to rattle violently. The beds shook. Dust rained from the ceiling, and Daniel or whatever was inside him began to laugh. That same awful, feminine laugh, high-pitched and echoing from everywhere at once. Leave him, Sam screamed. We can't fight this. We all backed away, panting, watching as Daniel twisted his body backward and crawled toward the far wall. Then he did something I'll never forget. He pressed his palms flat against the plaster and began to climb. Like a spider, smooth, quick, unnatural. He stopped halfway, his head jerking toward us, his mouth twitching into that same ghastly grin. Then, in one swift motion, he flung himself off the wall and landed on Andre, slamming him to the floor. Andre screamed. Daniel's hands locked around his neck, his thumbs pressing into his throat until his eyes rolled back. The veins in Daniel's arms bulged like ropes, his teeth bared, his face inches from Andre's. And all the while, that woman's voice whispered from his mouth. He's mine. You can't take him. You'll never take him from me. We rushed in, all of us grabbing Daniel, pulling, hitting, shouting. It took 6 of us to drag him off. Even then, he fought, shrieking, his voice breaking between Daniel's deep tone and that higher, inhuman scream. We tied him up with torn bed sheets, binding his wrists and ankles, forcing him back onto the bed. His chest rose and fell rapidly, his body twitching, veins dark as ink crawling beneath his skin. Then, suddenly silence. He stopped moving. For a few seconds, the only sound was our ragged breathing. Then, softly, from Daniel's lips came a whisper. She's not gone. She never leaves. Not until she gets what she wants. Then his eyes rolled back, and he went completely still. We stood there, too afraid to touch him, too afraid to even blink. The air was icy cold. My breath came out as fog. I didn't dare look at the ceiling, afraid of what I might see looking back. Somewhere outside, A dog howled. The wind began to rise again, rustling through the trees like a whisper of laughter. And in that dark, flickering silence, one thought crawled into my mind. A thought that has never left me since that night. What if the thing that possessed Daniel wasn't trying to kill him, but to stay with him forever? Dawn never felt so slow. By the time the first gray light began to leak through the broken shutters, we were still awake. None of us dared close our eyes. Daniel lay motionless on the bed, wrists tied to the frame with torn sheets. His face had gone pale, lips cracked, a faint shadow pulsing beneath his eyelids, as though something was still moving inside him. Marcus sat in the corner, trembling, muttering prayers under his breath. Leo's arm was broken, wrapped in a blood-soaked towel. Sam hadn't spoken since the attack. He just stared at the floor, rocking gently, eyes vacant. I tried not to look at Daniel, but I couldn't help it. Every few minutes, his chest would rise too high, like someone inside was pushing against his ribs. Then it would stop, his mouth would twitch, and a faint murmur would crawl out. The sound of a woman humming a lullaby, soft and distant, like she was singing through his throat. It was around AM when Marcus said, "We need help." No one argued. There was a small village 2 miles away, and we'd heard of a man there, an old healer named Sheikh Yusuf, known for driving away spirits and sickness. We took turns watching Daniel while Marcus and Andre went to find him. The hours that followed felt endless. The air inside the room seemed to thicken, warm and heavy like steam. The smell of rot was everywhere, not just sweat or blood, but something sweet, decaying. At one point, I thought I heard whispering, not loud, just a faint conversation. I turned, no one was speaking, but Daniel's lips were moving, slow and deliberate, and the words coming out of him weren't English. They weren't any language I knew. It was rhythmic, ancient, and horribly calm. When Marcus finally returned, the man he brought with him, nothing like I expected. Sheikh Yusuf was tall and lean, with a weathered face and piercing gray eyes that looked both kind and terrifying. He carried a small leather satchel and a thick book wrapped in red cloth. The moment he entered the room, he stopped. Something changed in his face. His expression tightened, and he whispered, "This is no ordinary spirit." We stepped back. He knelt beside Daniel, his hand hovering over his chest, not touching, just sensing. After a moment, he looked at us. "He's not alone," he said quietly. "There's something old inside him, something that thinks he belongs to her. Can you get it out?" I asked. He didn't answer at first. He just opened his bag, pulling out small jars of oil, incense, and a brass bowl etched with strange symbols. "I can try," he said finally, "but it doesn't want to leave." He began preparing the ritual. He drew a circle of salt and ash around the bed, muttering under his breath. The air inside the circle seemed to shimmer faintly, like heat rising off pavement. He placed 4 candles, one at each corner of the bed, and lit them. The flames burned blue. Then, with a steady voice, he began to recite verses from his book. The sound was beautiful at first, melodic, deep, powerful, but it quickly changed. The air grew colder, the light dimmed, the candle flames began to flicker violently, and a low hum filled the room, like a swarm of bees trapped in a jar. Daniel's body twitched, his fingers clenched, his eyes shot open, and they weren't white anymore. They were silver, glowing faintly in the dim light. His mouth opened, and the humming stopped. Then came the voice. "I told you," it said, smooth and icy. "He's mine." Yusuf didn't flinch. He kept reciting, louder now, each word echoing unnaturally. The walls began to shake, dust falling from the ceiling. The beds creaked. The windows banged open with a crash, letting in a blast of wind that scattered the ashes in the circle. Daniel began to rise, not fully. His back arched, lifting his shoulders and head off the bed, his bound arms straining. The candles flickered so fast that they almost went out. His voice or her voice screamed through the room. "You can't take him. He belongs to me." The sound didn't just fill the air, it vibrated through it. My ears rang. My nose started bleeding. I felt the pressure of it in my skull, like something was clawing behind my eyes. Yusuf kept chanting. He reached into his satchel, pulled out a small vial of oil, and splashed it onto Daniel's forehead. Steam rose instantly, and Daniel shrieked a cry that was both male and female, layered and horrifying. The smell of burning flesh filled the room. Then came the laughter, soft at first, then louder, mocking. It came from Daniel's mouth, but his lips weren't moving. "She loves him," the voice whispered. "She found him years ago, under the trees. When he cried, she answered. When he was alone, she stayed. And now, you want to take him from her?" Daniel's head twisted toward me. "She said you saw her last night." My blood ran cold. The image of the trees flashed in my mind, their branches swaying without wind, something moving among them. "She's watching," he said. "Behind you." I turned instinctively. There was nothing there, just the flickering candlelight on the cracked wall. But for a split second, I swear I saw a shadow, long, thin, with hair drifting like smoke. Yusuf shouted something in a voice so loud, it didn't sound human anymore. The flames roared, the shadow shattered, and Daniel convulsed violently. His body bent upward, eyes rolling back. And then, with a deafening scream, it was gone. The candles blew out all at once. Silence. Daniel collapsed, limp, breathing raggedly. The blue light faded. The air slowly warmed again. For a long time, no one spoke. Yusuf finally exhaled and wiped the sweat from his face. "It's over," he said quietly. "For now." But then, Daniel's lips parted, and in a voice that was barely a whisper, the words came. "She says she'll come back. She promised me she would." A chill spread through the room again. The healer looked at me, his eyes grave. "She's not gone," he murmured. "She's only waiting." Outside, the wind picked up, and through the open window, the trees swayed not with the breeze, but with rhythm, like something unseen was moving through them. And in that moment, as Daniel slept, I realized the real horror hadn't ended. It had only changed shape. Morning. Sunlight seeped weakly through the torn curtains, but the light felt wrong, pale, gray, almost lifeless. It didn't bring warmth. It only made the room look sicker. Dust hung in the air like faint mist, and everything smelled of burnt oil and iron. Daniel was asleep, or unconscious. His chest rose and fell in slow, shallow breaths, the rope still binding his wrists to the bed. None of us dared untie him. The memory of last night was carved too deep into our nerves. The healer, Sheikh Yusuf, sat by the window, his hands trembling as he thumbed the beads of his tasbih. His lips moved in prayer, but there was exhaustion in his face, the kind of exhaustion that belongs to a man who has fought something ancient and nearly lost. Marcus whispered, "Is it over?" Yusuf didn't answer. He just stared out the window, eyes fixed on the trees beyond the hostel walls. The morning wind was moving them slowly, and for a moment, I thought I saw something sway out of rhythm. A figure between the branches, black and shapeless. I blinked. It was gone. By noon, the other boys started to leave. Some said they were going home. Others said they couldn't stay another night in that cursed place. The headmaster had been told Daniel suffered a seizure. No one dared speak the truth. Who would believe it anyway? When Yusuf finally rose to leave, I followed him to the door. "Will he be okay?" I asked. The old man paused, looking back at Daniel one last time. "He will wake," he said softly, "but he will never be the same. Spirits like this, they don't love as humans do. They consume what they desire." Then he whispered something else almost to himself. "She's still here, waiting for him to call her again." And he left. That night, the hostel was quiet. Too quiet. The air felt unnaturally still, like the whole building was holding its breath. Only I stayed with Daniel, watching over him. Around him, he stirred. His eyes opened slowly, clear, human again, and for the first time in days, he looked like himself. I leaned closer. "Daniel, can you hear me?" He nodded weakly, his lips dry and cracked. "She's gone," he whispered. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But even as he said it, the window behind him creaked open slightly, though there was no wind. The curtain moved like someone had brushed past it. He saw it too. His pupils widened, and he turned his face away. "Don't look at her," he said suddenly, his voice trembling. "She hates when people stare." My stomach twisted. The room felt colder again, and the faint sound of humming drifted from somewhere far away. The same lullaby I had heard through his lips the night before. Daniel began to cry quietly. She promised she'd leave, he murmured. But she lied. Then he reached for my hand, his grip surprisingly strong. If I ever disappear, he said, don't try to find me. Promise me that. I wanted to ask what he meant, but his eyes were already closing again. Within minutes, he was asleep. When I woke up at dawn, the ropes were cut. The bed was empty. The window was wide open. Outside, the ground beneath the nearest tree was disturbed. Footprints leading into the forest, but none coming back. His blanket was gone too, as if he'd taken it to cover himself for a journey that wasn't meant for the living. We searched for hours. We shouted his name until our voices broke, but the forest swallowed every sound. At one point, I thought I heard laughter echoing between the trees. Faint, distant, feminine. By evening, the search was called off. They said he must have run away, but I knew better. We all did. Weeks passed. Life in the hostel went on, though nothing felt normal. At night, the wind through the trees sometimes carried a soft melody, a woman's hum, rising and falling, the same tune Daniel used to murmur in his sleep. One night, as I walked past his old room, I saw something that froze me where I stood. On the inside of the window, faintly etched into the glass by some sharp object, were words. She found me. I left the hostel soon after. Years passed. I tried to bury that memory, to convince myself it was all some nightmare of youth, a shared hallucination born from fear and exhaustion. But the mind forgets details. The soul doesn't. Every now and then, dream of him. Always the same. Daniel standing in a dark forest, half hidden behind the trees, his eyes pale and distant. Behind him, a woman's figure, long hair swaying like smoke, hands resting gently on his shoulders. And he's smiling. Sometimes, when I wake, I can still hear that same low humming from outside my window. Soft, sad, familiar. Last night, it happened again. I looked through the blinds, and in the faint silver glow of the streetlight, I saw her, standing beneath the old tree across the road. Long hair, bare feet, eyes like white fire, and beside her, half hidden by the shadows, Daniel. He looked right at me. He smiled. That same, cold, gentle smile. Then she took his hand, and they both vanished into the darkness. Now, as I write this, the air around me feels heavy again. The wind outside isn't blowing, but the branches are moving softly, rhythmically, like they're dancing to that old, cursed lullaby. And somewhere beneath that sound, I can hear her voice whispering tender and terrible, right beside my ear. You shouldn't have helped him. He was never yours to save. The candle beside me just flickered, the window creaked, and I swear and hear footsteps on the roof. The end. Did you enjoy the story? Let us know in the comments. And if you liked it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to The Horror Dream. Want more stories like this? Subscribe to The Horror Dream, and we'll bring you more darkness, just for you. If you enjoy a little chill down your spine, stick around, like, share, and hit that subscribe button, right here on The Horror Dream. Your support keeps us going, so stay with us. Subscribe to The Horror Dream for more spine-tingling tales.